understanding that different choices work well for different kinds of actions. If you're trying to really keep something shut down, going limp and having them carry you buys you a lot more time than if you're been doing this work a long time. I started when I was a kid. I was sort of a juvenile delinquent who learned to channel my energy a little bit more constructively. And I've done a lot of work over the years, worked in many movements. When I was actually in high school and college, I was the president of my Student Government Association. When I graduated, I sort of came out of that thinking that I would do some work on Congress, right? And we were working against the U.S. war in Central America and around the anti-nuclear movement. But I learned through that sort of the illusions of power that happened there, and made a decision in my life to not try and work in those centers of power, but to work in the street and to build a popular mandate that might move those in the current system that we have in the right direction. And I think that's the only thing we have going for us at this point. And Occupy has exploded that at a whole new level.
Hey, my name is Fithian. I'm here in Chicago working with folks around the NATO Summit. And I really was very happy to be invited here to share some of my experience. I've had the opportunity to work in nonviolent direct action since the early 80s. I've been organizing since the mid-70s. I've been very privileged to work with many communities around the world and around the country who are fighting for immigrant rights, environmental justice, workers' rights, peace. And I've worked using nonviolent direct action because I believe it's the most rapidly and radically transforming process of any. It delivers the goods, and I think it really lays the foundation for how we can build a world where people can take responsibility for their own lives. So I'm sharing some of what I've learned over the years and learning some more stuff here about how people are working here in Chicago.
There's lots of pieces here, from how do we stay focused and grounded to how do we actually stay safe, whatever that means, right? How to pass the lines, how do we look at de-escalation. Sometimes there are things called spectrograms where we look at tactics and where we line up on those things. I want to talk a little bit about consensus and affinity groups, because that's a model of organizing that I think is critical to this political moment in time. And then I want to do lots of role plays, from some mobile tactics to some blockades to some mass sit-in scenarios, and talk about how do we support people doing direct action as a way to wrap this stuff up. I want to start out by talking a little bit about this political moment, because I actually think it's really critical for us to understand where we are in the history of change. Because I've been doing this stuff for over 35 years and I've never seen anything like this in my life, right? And so I am hugely optimistic about what can happen. And I'm very patient in what is happening, because change takes time and it's an evolution. But in every other movement I've been a part of, in moments like Seattle, you had all the movements come together and we all stayed in our own issue silos. But what happened in this moment that was really kicked off by the man in Tunisia who self-immolated because he was not able to sell his wares at the vendor in political protest, ignited a people-powered revolution in Tunisia that overthrew their leader, that spread across to Egypt, that spread across the region. We all watched it. Right? Everybody not seeing that? And how amazing it was to watch what was happening, because you saw so many people coming together in ways we haven't seen in a long time. Start this up. Yeah, let me figure out how I'm going to do this without, well, you guys can all see that above my head, right? Mm-hmm. Right, the Tunisian Revolution, the Egyptian Revolution. And there's a lot we can learn from Egypt, more than we realize, more than we've had access to. And one of the lessons is in one of these photos here. Anyone want to see what is that? What are one of the things that we learned about the Egyptian Revolution?
She's kissing him, she loves him.
Oh, yeah.
Unity.
Yeah, right? In any revolution, it's when those who are in the role of defending the status quo or the state begin to change sides. That's a really critical thing to understand, and that's one reason why I'm actually a nonviolent activist, because there are so many guns in this country that they control, right? That we're going to get slaughtered, is my opinion. So I'm looking for other ways. And part of that transfer. So we saw this huge mobilization. And again, the thing that was important about that, which was also the same thing that was important about Wisconsin, is that people didn't come together from their own little issue thing. They came together as a whole, and they took together as the community as a whole, right? People organized sanitation, people organized medical, people organized legal support, right? And that's a common theme that we have to understand is foundational to this moment. Self-organizing to take care of basic needs of our communities. One of the trainings that I do is called shutting things down to open things up. And so I'm trying to give you some ideas about how you can organize people to have great impact on spaces. And so again, I did this last night, sorry folks. But this is how we did Seattle. Maybe I should pick another example. Because once you begin to train your mind on how to think about some of this stuff, you can begin to look at any space differently, right? Because any action you're going to do, you need to go scout a lot. And you begin to figure out what are the doors, and where's this, and how might the people move, and blah, 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 blah. So in Seattle, the goal was to shut it down, and we were very clear about it. That's another reason why I like nonviolent direct action. Part of the nonviolent direct action of the civilians is you say very clearly what you're going to do. We're going to shut you down, right? And that then sets them in motion, right? And then they begin to defend themselves and barricade themselves, and the alerts go out, and the tension is building. That's fabulous. Right? We want that kind of stuff. And then when they shut it down themselves, then we just have to show up wherever they shut it down. Right? So in this particular case, what we did is we took the center building, we drew a circle around it, we made slices of the pie, we had affinity groups come in advance, we trained them on a common vision, we trained thousands of people on a common vision. And again, as you build power around NATO, you've got to think about that piece of it. Each affinity group would go scout, they would decide where and when they would throw down their blockade and how they would throw it down. They clustered with other people in their slice, they made sure they had their stuff. In the nights leading up to it, we made sure that we had enough bodies, and if we were weak in one zone, we would redistribute our resources, right? And then the two yellow lines coming in were our public assembly sites at 7. So we knew at 6:30, all of these other groups were throwing down their actions. Nobody knew where or when, so that's how you get security culture. Right? That would be your affinity group. Not by, let's not talk about the action, right? In a mass public action, you have to talk about the action, right? So we got to be clear about where we hold confidentiality. And then these thousands came in and added value and supported those blockades. And then the big marches of the labor folks came in, right? So there was all this convergence. So again, when I think about this stuff, when I want to have big impact on a target, I think about what is the geography around them. Right? And then how do you think about, because we have limited time, energy, and resources, right? We need to concentrate our energy and resources in the right places at the right time.
You're playing the bad guy, right?
You guys ready? No? Chicago PD, this is a demonstration. Do not move right now, you're really arrested. Chicago PD, whatever you are. Do not move right now, you're arrested. So I might get my thumb in even tighter, keep my thumb underneath there, right? So all that being said and done, you know, we're only as strong as our weakest link, right? So when we were late, we had an opening around. So what this might mean is that our bodies are different size and how they work. They're going to try and go through. All right, that's the shield. Yeah. So our goal is to occupy the street behind you. Ready, go. Stop it,
the St. Paul principles that are now adopted here in Chicago as the Chicago principles, and how that works in the community.
Right. I mean, actually, that traces back to the early 2001, when we brought together labor union folks, some Black Bloc activists, some people of faith to say, we're going to be together for the IMF and World Bank. We don't really like each other. We don't have the same strategy, so how do we work together? We hammered out a set of practices of things we needed from one another. And those have evolved over the ages that actually led to the St. Paul principles. And so I think that for people that work in different communities in different ways, agreements around these principles are one of the ways that we can mitigate our differences and come together as a much larger community. And
you mentioned it yourself. One of the big groups that it's everybody's bugaboo is Black Bloc. Please just address Black Bloc activities and what they actually means.
I mean, the Black Bloc comes out of Germany. The Autonomen movement was the anti-fascist movement. And it, migrated to this country. It's people all around the world identify it as a tactic. And it's a tactic of people who are willing to take greater risks and who believe that property destruction can have an economic cost on these corporations. A lot of their tactics are wanting to actually be in solidarity and protecting other communities by willing to take more risks themselves. But it gets complicated and patronizing and problematic on a multitude of levels, and it's very vulnerable for infiltration. So I'm not a big fan of the tactic or diversity of tactics. I work with utmost respect with people who have differences, and I try and work strategically. But know that we have different ways that we need to work.
Well, thank you.
And if it was a bigger space, right. So does anyone explain what we just did?
There was 3 rows, and when we got to a certain point, each of them went in a different direction. One of them went straight, one went left, one went right. And as soon as the police started to reach for the first people, that causes an opening, and the person behind knew to jump through that, and any cops who were going to reach for them are going to, every time they reach for somebody, it's an opening, so the people following are trying to leap through the holes.